So let's come to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 14. 1 Corinthians chapter 14. And we're going to read verse number 8. For if the trumpet give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to the battle? Imagine yourself back there with a large army of soldiers back in the days of ancient Israel. And you can see the sun glittering off the spears and the swords and the shields and the body armor and even off of a trumpet, because they had a trumpeter. In those days, the trumpeter would make a certain sound when it was time to attack or advance, and it would make another different sound if they were to retreat. Now, the trumpeter had to stay close to the commander-in-chief, or the commander of the army, didn't he? Because the commander of the army is the one who would instruct the trumpeter as to what to sound and when to sound it. But amid all the noise of battle, here you are there. Just imagine yourself being there above the thundering of the chariots and the shouting of the soldiers, and you hear a sound from the trumpet, only it's a strangled sound. It's a blast that just doesn't sound clear. And you stop, and you begin to wonder, was that a sound for advance, or was that a sound for retreat? And then you notice your comrades all around you. They're stumbling around in confusion and not knowing what to do. Some of them were charging, and others were retreating, and the others were just standing around in confusion in circles. And the enemy did what? Took advantage of it and strikes their deadly blow.
And wiped them out.
Now, what has that trumpet, many hundreds of years ago, what does that trumpet in battle have to do with you and with me today? Well, many of us, have you found, are stumbling around? We haven't heard a clear sound. Does that sound familiar to any of us? Have you ever been there? But you know, our message is a message of certainty, isn't it not? It's a sound of conviction. For if the trumpet give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself for the battle? And beloved, there is a battle. Now we know the battle has been won, don't we? But there is a battle ensuing, and we need to hear that certain sound. Well, I believe that the message here for us today is that it's sounding an alarm among God's people. It's not an unclear sound, but a certain sound that will arouse us to go forward and advance to the battle. What kind of a sound are we hearing today? You know, Isaiah chapter 58, what does it say? Chapter 58, verse 1, we all know that, don't we? Cry aloud, spare not, lift up your voice like a trumpet, and show our people, my people, their transgressions, and the house of Israel, their sins. Let me share with you a statement from Evangelism, page 119. Those who present the truth are to preach the gospel with earnestness. They are to sow seeds that will bear fruit for the glory of God. The trumpet is to give a certain sound. The attention of the people is to be called to the third angel's message. Let not God's servants act like men walking in their sleep, but like men preparing for the coming of Christ. End quote. You know, 37 years ago, the president of our general conference was speaking to a group of workers in a workers' meeting, and he presented 10 points that were vital in the finishing of God's work in this world. In the second point, he said this: He said, keep the air clear as to what the Seventh-day Adventist message really is, so that we can give the trumpet a certain sound. Now, would you say amen to that? Amen. Now, I'd like to speak to this point today. But first, I'd like to make 3 brief observations. Number 1, the message that we present today is the same as it has always been. It's a proclamation of the 3 angels' message of Revelation chapter 14. And in so doing, we actually include a 4th one, don't we? I say this because without this message, our message really would be irrelevant. Our message without this would not be present truth. Secondly, second observation is that the great pillars of our church, they still remain. They're still standing. They're still firm. The great fundamental principles of God's last day church has survived severe attack, as you well know, and censure as well. Through the years, of course, through all of this, it is still there. The third observation is our church Bible-based teachings have made us what we are. Let's not forget that. Our church's Bible-based teachings have made us what and who we are. Counsels to Writers and Editors, CWE 52. We are to hold to the sure pillars of our faith. The principles of truth that God has revealed to us are our only true foundation. They have made us what we are. Said my accompanying angel, woe to him who shall move a block or stir a pin of these messages. The true understanding of these messages is of vital importance. The destiny of souls hangs upon the manner in which they are received. Now, beloved, that is so plain. I don't see how anybody can misunderstand that. There's a very important point I'd like to make right now, though, and we need to get this very clear in our heads. The prophet to the remnant counsels us that we are to preach from the Bible. And here I am quoting a lot of Spirit of Prophecy statements, aren't I? But she says that we're to preach from the Bible. We must understand that the great Bible-based doctrines of the Seventh-day Adventist Church have not come to us through the Spirit of Prophecy, or the writings of the Spirit of Prophecy. When this movement began in fulfillment of Bible prophecy, there was just a little handful of people. In fact, it was less than 50 people. They came together and they took this great 3 angels' message to this earth's remotest bounds. That's what their purpose was. But they were overwhelmed with the task. And because of the disappointment, as you well know, they went to their knees and they came up and prophesied again, as we read in Revelation chapter 10. They were to change a bitter experience into a taste of honey. But I want to tell you that there are some in our midst today who are attacking these great pillars of the faith with their smooth philosophical arguments. They're using warm, loving, gracious appeals that throw many unsuspecting members off guard. So we must not allow us to get into an unsuspecting attitude. Isn't that right? It is cloaked with the name righteousness by faith. Righteousness by faith. Now that sounds really good. Sounds sweet, doesn't it? It really sounds good. Sort of like the word love. The word love is tossed around so freely today, but it is totally misunderstood. Most of this love is a love of self-aggrandizement. Did you know that? I think most of us feel righteousness by faith is a nice word, a nice term rather. Our people would say, well, good, if it's based on that, I'm in favor of it. I understand that. Now listen, those who are in the attack mode and those who are trying to bring deceptive Of course, in their heart, they're not thinking of deceptive tactics, but the subtle tactics that deceive, they will respond to those kind of statements by saying, no, I don't think you do understand that. Let us explain it to you. Come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly, you see. And through publications and media and preaching and books and word of mouth, this new form of righteousness by faith is promoted, and everyone gets all excited. It sounds so warm and so fuzzy. Well, you know, I'm in favor of that. Are you following me? This is what we've been waiting for. But as you continue, if you're honest in heart and you begin listening closer and you suddenly begin to realize that you are listening to another gospel. Come with me to Galatians chapter 1. Galatians chapter 1. You begin to realize rather quickly, if you're honest in heart, that there's something wrong here. Galatians chapter 1, verse 6 and 7. I marvel that you are so soon removed from him that called you into the grace of Christ unto another gospel, which is not another, but there be some that trouble you and would pervert the gospel of Christ. Well, you may be asking, what is this other gospel? And what are the teachings of this other gospel? Well, I'd like to take a few minutes this morning and just lay it right on the line so that we won't be fuzzy about it. Let me share with you what that other gospel is telling us. First point. And I'm going to use a well-known term under this new theology, so to speak. You've heard that many times, I'm sure, as it's often called. The investigative judgment did not begin in 1844. In fact, there is no investigative judgment. There is no heavenly sanctuary. The 1844 message just has virtually no significance at all to us as a church. Well, Review and Herald article, May the 25th, 1905, she says this. The enemy will bring in false theories such as the doctrine that there is no sanctuary. Evangelism 2:21. I'm going to give you a few more quotes from the Spirit of Prophecy. A couple more here. Evangelism 2:21 says, any man who seeks, I'm reading the wrong one. The correct understanding of the ministration of the heavenly sanctuary is the foundation of our faith. Now we realize that, don't we? Or do we? The correct understanding of the ministration of the heavenly sanctuary is the foundation of our faith. We must be very careful that we do not break up the foundation of the remnant church. End quote. Now, Life and Teachings, page 49. Life and Teachings, page 49. She says, any man who seeks to present theories which lead us from the light that has come to us on the ministration of the heavenly sanctuary should not be accepted as a teacher. That's pretty forthright, isn't it? I don't think we can misunderstand that at all. I mean, how much clearer can it be? I mean, when someone begins to state things that are false or things that are fuzzy about the sanctuary or about the judgment message, they should not be serving as a teacher. It's just that plain. That's just that cut and dry. About 1902, you remember the story, you've heard the account of Elder Ballinger. He was a Seventh-day Adventist minister. He developed his own theory of the sanctuary, which by the way has very similar views of the new theology teaching today. He began to teach that. And guess what happened to Brother Ballinger? He was dismissed from the work. Praise the Lord. Mrs. White stated in one selected messages, page 161, she said, if we accept Elder Ballinger's message, it will destroy the faith of God's people and the truth that has made us what we are. She says, stay away from it. Leave it alone. Stay away from it. Leave it alone. So, point number 1, 1844 message is invalid. No significance to it at all. The trumpet giving an uncertain sound. Okay, point number 2. Point number 2. The papacy is not the Antichrist. The man of sin or the beast power. None of these are indicative of the papacy whatsoever. In fact, there is a minister in this very conference that wrote some articles about that recently, not too long ago. Well, let me ask you, how many years have we taught and preached the truth about the papacy based upon biblical reckoning, prophetic reckoning? I mean, were they wrong? Did God lead us incorrectly in those days? I mean, did he change his mind? The prophet says in 7 BC 9:11, 7 Bible Commentary 9:11, in prophecy, the papal power is specified as the man of sin. She's very clear. Great Controversy 443. We just read this the other day, and we're using that in our worship at home once more. We must study the characteristics of the beast itself, the papacy. That's the way it's written. I'm sure that's not in the Great Hope, though. Publication. The publication, Great Hope, mind you. Nobody can understand that. I mean, it's clear as a bell. The pioneers of our church studied the prophecies of Daniel and the Revelation, and they discovered very clearly that the beast power, that the Antichrist, that the man of sin is indeed the papacy. And the papacy, of course, they began to be concerned about not just this little group, but many of the Protestant groups that were disparaging their ministry by pointing to them as the beast and the man of sin, and they didn't like that too much. If these Protestants keep preaching like this, we got us a problem. So they decided they had to do something about it. Do you know what they did? They commissioned 2 scholars, 2 Jesuit scholars. Do you remember their names? Luis Alcazar and who was the other one? Francisco Ribeiro. That's right. What were they commissioned to do? They were commissioned to come up with a solution, a different interpretation of the great prophecies of Revelation. Of course, Bellarmine was also a part of that commission. But would you like to know what they came up with to take the finger off the papacy? Luis Alcazar came up with what is known as preterism. Preterism. It says that the entire book of Revelation applies to old pagan Rome. And of course, we've had different interpretations of what the beast power was back then, everything from Nero to the Seleucid king Antiochus Epiphanes, as you probably know, who was a very short-lived king or emperor. And then, of course, there was Francisco Ribeiro's second application. He came up with a more widely accepted theory, and that is the theory of futurism. So here we have preterism and futurism. The papacy is right here in the middle, you see. And they're trying to take the finger off of him on both ends of it. Futurism, what does that say? That says that Revelation is all future. It's all in the future. After the second coming of Christ, after the second coming, there, of course, will be the secret rapture. Will be, of course, and the second coming will be a secret rapture. And they take the 3.5 years of the 490-year prophecy of Daniel and places it after God's people are raptured. And then he brings in a Jewish Antichrist after the second coming. After the second coming. So no need to worry about it. Just calm down. Take it easy. We cannot possibly be, the papacy cannot possibly be the beast power. It was either before or it's going to be after it. Now, most of the professed Protestant churches, and I say that professed, I want you to pick that up, okay? Most of the professed Protestant churches of today have accepted futurism. Most of the popular religious books that are marketed today teach futurism, as you well know. Now, I want you to listen to something that's hard to understand. There are those new theology Adventists who have adopted the principle of futurism. Many are saying, Antichrist has not yet come. It's future. Don't worry about it. I just mentioned earlier there's a pastor. I don't know if he's still in the Ohio Conference or not, but he was teaching that himself. Don't worry about the Antichrist. So point number 2 that I'm bringing to you this morning is Antichrist is not the papacy. The trumpet giving an uncertain sound. All right, point number 3. Point number 3. The new theology teaches that the world is tens of thousands of years old, creating much confusion concerning the age of the earth. The trumpet giving an uncertain sound. Spiritual Gifts, Volume 3, page 92, she says, the world now is only about 6,000 years old. All right, point number 4. Point number 4. Now, I want you to listen closely to this. We're going to spend a little bit more time on point number 4. The new theology says that the law of God can never truly be kept by mortal man, even with Christ dwelling in the heart. Oh, they like to teach Christ needs to dwell in your heart, but you cannot obey his law. So by making this statement, they would disagree with me making this statement, but that's really what they're saying. The law of God can never truly be kept by a mortal man in this life, even with Christ dwelling in the heart. Let's talk about this for a minute. What it's really saying is that perfection is impossible in this life. You cannot overcome sin. You've got to live with it, because you're never going to get rid of it until the time of glorification, when all of a sudden, bingo, in the kingdom of heaven. Well, beloved, listen, I may have stated this before, but it's one of my popular phrases, and I've always said that if this were true, you have been robbed of your power of choice. You understand that? You've been robbed of your power of choice, if that's the way it's going to happen. This, beloved, is nothing more than what error that has been taught for many years now. The once saved, always saved error. That's all it is. And the church has taught against the once saved, always saved principle for years and years, and it has now swept in through the new theology teaching. Signs of the Times, July 23, 1902. Everyone who by faith obeys God's commandments will reach the condition of sinlessness in which Adam lived before his transgression. Volume 10, Bible Echoes, 172. By obedience to the law of God, he, Jesus, testified to all its immutable character, while at the same time proving that its precepts could be perfectly obeyed by his grace in every son and daughter of Adam. Isn't that amazing? Adventist Home, page 16. This one we need to memorize. If you would be a saint in heaven, you must first be a saint in the earth. Adventist Home, page 16. Jesus does not, well, this is from also in Adventist Home 16. Jesus does not change the character at his coming. The work of transformation must be done now. Now, I want you to know that we're not inspectors of perfection. We all understand that, don't we? We're not going around and saying, well, so-and-so's perfect, so-and-so's not. I'm perfect and you're not. I'm not and you are. That's not what it's all about. It has nothing to do with it. We can forget the word perfection, really. The only way that you can be perfected is through the grace and love of our God who instills it in our hearts and our minds, and we don't even realize it. You don't even realize it. What did she say? There will be Enochs in our day, didn't she? But God is not going to wave a magical wand which says, presto, you now possess a different character. Now, we understand, of course, that this cannot be accomplished by ourselves. Isn't that right? We understand that, don't we? We cannot do this by ourselves anyway. Jesus says, what in John chapter 15, verse 5, he says, without me, you can do nothing. Well, what does this mean? How is it possible? How is it possible to reach that state in your experience? Well, it's possible because he says so. He inspired the Bible writer of Philippians chapter 14 to write what? I can do all things through Christ. All things through Christ. And the wonderful thing is that it is Jesus who does it. He does it not separately from us, and it just instills it in us. He does it in us. He works within us. This is a joint effort involved here. Romans chapter 8. Come with me to Romans chapter 8 and verse 3 and 4. Romans 8, verse 3 and 4, it says, for what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin, condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us who walk, not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. So, Jesus does this in me. There's a construction program that should be going on in your heart. And he's got solid scaffolding too. Yeah, he knows how to construct it in your heart if you allow him to. If I allow him to. And he does this before Jesus comes. You see, Jesus does not save us in sin. There's no provision for being saved in sin. One sin can keep us out of heaven. Matthew chapter 1 verse 21 says, thou shalt call his name Jesus because he shall what? He shall save his people from sin. From their sins. Not in their sins, but he shall save them from their sins. The Bible makes no provision for unrighteousness covered by faith. Did you hear me? There's no provision for unrighteousness covered by faith. So point number 4 is pure and simple heresy. No matter how you shake it, it's pure and simple heresy. So those 4 points I wanted to bring to you in our first meeting this morning. But we must be walking after the flesh and not after the Spirit.